Kia ora, and welcome again to another edition of the Language Fuel podcast, coming to you again from our home workshop. Messy as it is, it's real, it's where stuff gets done around home. And the office was just a little bit busy this morning, so I've popped home to quickly record this. Today, as I promised last time, I am going to tell you a little bit further about my own personal journey learning Te Reo Māori, the native language of New Zealand here. And I have had a couple of editions of our podcast previously, back in season 1. We had a couple of episodes where I had kind of, got all excited about learning Te Reo as a self-directed language learner. I know how to learn languages, I know how to teach them, I understand linguistics, how hard can it be? And then reality set in, and real life and the business and home responsibilities, whatever, it just ended up being lower and lower priority. And I think after only a couple of episodes it sort of petered out a little bit. I even had someone contact me and go, hey, where's the next episode? And I'm like, hasn't really happened. But as I mentioned last time, I've recently attended the CLESOL conference in New Zealand, Community Languages in ESOL, which is every 2 years, and it was so inspiring, just the revitalization of the Māori language and how important it is for all of us to be learning Māori and to keep that language alive. And in particular, what they were saying is if we can really make sure that Māori is thriving and surviving, other languages will too. It's sort of a mindset or a cultural thing that in New Zealand we need to embrace bilingualism. Now, I do speak other languages, but not here in New Zealand because I don't tend to be connected too much to those communities. However, Māori is something that's everywhere. It's on all our street signs, it's on the TV. You can read, things here and there. So definitely have a special place for Māori in my heart. And so I'm going to continue that journey. And since my experience last time taught me that doing it by myself is not going to be sustainable, it's not going to, be effective because it does get lost down the priority list, I chose to join a local community class, community Te Reo class. And I've had one lesson. That was a couple of weeks ago. It's every fortnight, every 2 weeks at the local community centre. So I just thought I would share how that went and what my thoughts were on that, my reflections on that. First off, massive, massive kudos to the teacher who is, he may be getting paid, I don't know, but it's probably only a little bit. It's free for us to attend. So if he is getting paid, it's being sponsored by the government, I suspect. And I have taught community languages classes before, and that was, 20 years ago. Let's just say it's not a particularly lucrative sort of a thing to be doing. So massive kudos to him. I suspect he's doing it probably not just for the finances, but more, out of the love of his heart. So, and how hard is it to stand up when, being honest, he doesn't have, training. It's not his career. He's not a teacher by trade. So standing up in front of a group of strangers, because you never know who you're going to get in a class like that, and just saying, hey, I want to teach you guys some of my language. Or, he actually said he is not fluent in Te Reo, and we've talked before about the difference between fluency and proficiency. I guess I would translate that to say he's not highly proficient. He certainly is fluent in what he knows because he was able to, demonstrate to us, rattling off quite a lot of things in Te Reo. So definitely he had fluency, but what, obviously he's meaning is he's not highly proficient in the language. And you know what? That is so common. Even in the CLESOL conference, I mentioned last time there were people doing what they could to revitalize the language, even when they themselves were coming from a position of wanting to learn more of the language themselves because they didn't feel like they had a huge, really strong proficiency in it. So, he's not alone in that fact. So massive kudos to him for just coming and, saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stand there and teach Te Reo. So awesome that he was able to do that. I loved the fact that it was a community class. So it's in the middle of a working day, but I've told myself this is kind of part of my work, part of my business. So I'm very justified to attend a language class once every 2 weeks on a Wednesday morning. And so, but typically the people who can have the time to attend a Wednesday morning class are the people who are otherwise based at home for whatever reason. So we had a huge range of people. There were some young mums with their babies, and that was really nice to be part of that. They just had their babies on their laps or playing on a mat or something like that. And how awesome that they want to engage in this as well. We had some retired folks. Some great stories were this one woman who recently did a DNA test, and she said, she found out that she had a 16th Maori heritage or something like that. So she's like, wow, and I never knew this. And she was in her 80s, and she said, this is my heritage. I really want to get into it. And that was there was a couple of other people similar to her. Don't know if they'd had actual DNA tests, but they sort of found out later through the family, grapevine, that there was some kind of connection in their family to a Maori community by way of a certain person. So they felt like they really wanted to connect in and wanted to do their best to learn the language. There was even a young man from French Guiana, actually sat next to me. He was just traveling. He's been in Australia for a wee while to learn English because his first language is Creole and French. He spoke French in his schooling, and he spent some time in Australia just recently learning English, wanted to come to New Zealand and thought, if I'm in New Zealand, I'm going to learn Maori. I thought, wow, that is cool. So he was there. Absolute beginner. I mean, although it was advertised as a beginner's class, like myself, most of us in the room, just being in New Zealand, we know phrases and greetings and so on. So none of us are 100% beginners, but this guy next to me was, and he had really no idea what to do. Um, and yeah, just the mix of people. There was a couple of people who were in assisted living situations, and they were there with their caregiver. So the caregiver was giving them an experience of, being in a classroom, and they were actually pretty good. I suspect they'd been to previous classes because they definitely knew quite a lot of the language already. So it was just wonderful to be in a really varied, this is the real community that I'm part of. This is my local community. I live in this area. I didn't know any of those people, so great to meet them. So this teacher, he did a fantastic job, just showing up, I think, is absolutely amazing. Some things he just naturally did right. I guess when I'm saying right, my qualification for using that term is just, that's how I would train somebody to teach a language, I guess. So one of the things he really did well is infusing the culture with the language. You can't separate them. So he structured his class in that way, and I suspect he's probably had some help on how to structure the class. So he told us at the beginning, giving us explaining the expectations so we were aware of what was coming. He talked about the fact that we were going to do the introductions to one another, and then we would go around and do the greeting. And if you know, they have the Māori hongi where they press noses, and so we did that. We went around, those people who were familiar with the pepeha or the mihi, where you talk a little bit about yourself in terms of who you are, what's your mountain, what's your lake, and all of that. Those who knew that about themselves could say that in Te Reo. He welcomed us to say it in English, and I thought to myself, I've just been at a conference where they were saying it's helpful for people to draw on their mother language when needed. And some of us in the classroom could not do the whole pepeha in Māori or at all in anything in Māori, so we just said it in English. And he had given us a structure, so that we could just go back and forth. And then we didn't feel out of place. It's not like it came to our turn and we sat there going, man, I feel really dumb now because I don't know how to say the second line. Or, so everybody was welcome, and I thought that was such a nice atmosphere in the class. So we went around, did our greetings, then we did the whole class greeting where we stood in a line and went around the circle, folded over, did the circle thing where you press noses. So everybody had a chance to greet everybody else. And only after that had finished, and I've forgotten the words in Māori, he talked about two specific phases, I guess, of the class, which resembles how it is when you enter a marae, where I guess you're in the tapu, the sort of sacred phase when you're just hearing everyone and getting to know everyone, doing that greeting, and that's very important. You need to be sort of more respectful and quiet while you're listening to that. After all the greetings are over, I think the phrase is noa, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, where it's sort of more informal, we're more open, we know each other now, we're sort of here, we're present. We stopped for a cup of tea at that point, so there was a cup of tea or coffee at the back of the room, and we had a good old long time. And then I was able to talk to the guy next to me, going, "Hey, obviously he didn't know anything, and he couldn't do any of the PPH himself. Most of us in New Zealand can at least say a few things about that." And then I figured out he's only literally arrived in the country a couple of weeks ago. He had no idea what was going on. So, I was able to connect in with that, and the person on the other side as well. We were kind of chatting, and the people in front of us. So lovely to have that social time. And then we kind of gathered back in again after that, and carried on a little bit with learning the language. Some other things he instinctively did really well was helping us with the pronunciation. Um, uh, I guess you have to assume that people need help with that. So he focused on the vowels and got us to say out loud with him. So again, some drilling, some modeling, really good. Maori has a lot of diphthongs, which is where there's two vowels that form the nucleus of the syllable. Of course, he's not using those terms. That's my way of explaining what's going on. He didn't even use the word diphthong. I think he may have said double vowel, something like that. And he said, look, it's easy. You just pronounce the first vowel, you pronounce the second vowel, and you kind of merge them together. And he literally did that. He got us, one by one, and he said, now quicker and quicker. And then we were all saying it. So he said, Maori's not hard in terms of the pronunciation. It's really not hard. So he was encouraging to us. He was encouraging in other ways, in that he talked about he told us the story about, I've just forgotten his name. I was Googling that this morning. Oh, Meng Foon, I think it is, who is the mayor of Gisborne. So Gisborne is a city down on the east coast of the North Island, and this mayor of the city, he has a Chinese heritage. I'm pretty sure he grew up in New Zealand, but he speaks, Chinese fluently with his family. I'm not sure if it's Cantonese or Mandarin. Doesn't really matter. The point is, he obviously speaks English fluently as well, having grown up here. And he speaks Te Reo Maori fluently as well. And as of 2018, I was just looking at he's got a little Wikipedia page, and I looked at a couple of other newspaper articles as well. He is the only mayor of a city in New Zealand that speaks Te Reo Maori fluently. Now, that was a little bit sad in the sense that nobody else does. I'm sure these people in public offices often get training sessions on, greetings and protocols and that sort of thing. But he's gone further, and he's fluent in the language. Now, he does have a history of living in an area where there was a very strong Maori community, and he was interviewed and talked about the fact that there was a lot of people around, and he heard it spoken quite a lot, so it was kind of easy for him as a child to connect in a little bit. But that's actually not the point. The point is that our teacher, the Te Reo teacher, quoted this mayor of saying, it's not hard to learn another language. All you need to do is learn a couple of words a day. And I thought to myself, if we all learnt a couple of words of Te Reo every day, it wouldn't take long, and our vocabularies would be massive. Now, of course, that has absolutely nothing to do with grammar, and I'm very aware that you need to have the grammar as well as the vocab. But, if I was going to add to that, I'd say learn chunks at a time. So learn a phrase a day, maybe one phrase a day, and then you'll kind of figure out the patterns as you go if you've got chunks at a time. So he was very encouraging to us, and he was very open, very inclusive. He kept the door wide open. My instinct, I guess, as having more of a Western culture myself, is to, hey, 5 minutes after the time when we were advertised to start, I'm going to shut that door so we've got some privacy so that we can, focus or whatever. He kept it open, and people kept coming in during the next hour. Now, I don't know if they would have come in anyway if the door was shut, but it was actually kind of nice to go, there's more people. The room was jam-packed. He had, 369, probably 18 seats, two lots of, two rows with three tables of three each. There were plenty more people than that, so we kept having to pull out more chairs and so on. There was a guy with a wheelchair. He came in, he just sat at the back in his wheelchair. So plenty of people, and he was open to all of them. He never ask anyone, hey, are you sure you're meant to be in this room? Because we started an hour ago. Nothing at all. Just welcomed them all in, gave them, his handouts and so on. So very welcoming, and I think that's probably related to the cultural aspects as well. The other thing he did in terms of including the cultural aspects was helping us with these kind of, I guess, set pieces. So there's prayers, karakia, and there's songs. And we sang some of them together. He had his guitar out, good on him. And that's important for the Maori culture because frequently when you have rituals, and again, if you're living in New Zealand, you're very aware of this, it involves both parties who are meeting, singing songs to one another, the groups, the two different groups. So some of the songs we sang, I was very familiar with, having sung them many, many times. But he gave us all, lists of the prayers and the songs, the waiata, and he gave us the translations of them as well. Again, he didn't have to do that, but I thought that was fabulous because even though I knew some of the more common songs, I knew the translations of them. Some people won't have known that, so he was able to provide the translations, and again helping us draw on the resources that we already had, which was our first language. So all in all, just a massive thumbs up to this guy. He did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed being there. And he wasn't perfect, let's be completely honest. It was quite clear he didn't have formal training as a language teacher. But it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. So, there was a few traps for young players that people often fall into when they're first starting out. He talked to the whiteboard, when you turn around to write something on the board, and you keep talking like this. Now, obviously, I've got a microphone near my mouth, so that didn't make any difference for you, but it changes the quality of the voice when you're sitting in a room and you can't see the guy's face and you don't, he's not able to judge what he's saying, how it's reacting. So, but you know what? How much does that really matter when he's standing out there giving of himself to us? Mattered very little. A couple of other little things. I think he could probably improve on his instruction giving. One of the handouts he passed to us towards the end, this beautiful one. It is beautiful, by the way. I'm not sure where he got it. It is published somewhere, and it does say that. But it took, and it's an exercise on prepositions, right? So the question at the top says, "Where is the pen?" Kei hea te pene. Where is the pen? And then you can, from the table that's at the rest of the handout, you can figure out how to say kei runga I te turu, it's on top of the chair, or ke raro I te tepu, it's underneath the table, and so on. So you can make sentences with the language he's provided, and there's pictures, so we knew exactly what the words meant. Lovely, lovely handout, which he had access to there. But people got a little bit confused at that point, and the person next to me was sort of like, what are we supposed to do here? Now, for me, it was kind of obvious because it's a classic kind of a handout that's wonderful to work with, and you can get a lot of practice, a lot of language from everybody, and they can just follow along literally by reading, and with a little bit of help, you can end up saying, 20 different sentences and substitution drills and all sorts of things like that. But for people who aren't familiar with language learning and they may not have seen a handout like that before, they were sort of a little bit confused, and I guess his instructions hadn't been clear enough. So again, a slightly classic first-timers error is that he tended to give us information, give us some handouts or information. He gave us a lot and we used a little, whereas it should obviously be the other way around. You could spend the whole 2 hours with one handout, so you could give us a little and help us to use it a lot, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of practice. That's perhaps the better way to ensure people are actually practicing and learning. However, again, this is something that I can come home and practice that by myself because he's given me the resources that I need, and it's my responsibility as the learner to do the learning from that information. Now, it could very well be that, just because there was people coming and going and it was our first session, maybe we ran out of time, and perhaps next time he's going to focus on it. Maybe this is going to be the focus of the whole term. I'm not sure. I don't quite know where he's going. It doesn't necessarily matter. But, so there were a few things. My point is he wasn't perfect, but it really didn't matter. And I thought if every community in New Zealand had a hero like that who's willing to give it a go and say, you know what, I may not be, quote, fluent, I may not be highly proficient at this language, but it's important enough to me to make an effort to share it with what I know I can share. Wow, I think I mean, we would be far closer to a more bilingual New Zealand if we had more heroes like him to lead us in classes. So, ka pai to my teacher there. I'm certainly not going to mention any names, that would be inappropriate. But, if you are watching this and thinking maybe I could teach a Te Reo class, I only know a little bit. Well, you know what? You know more than the people coming to your class. If you advertise it as a beginner's class, you're going to get beginners. So you know more than them, you have something to share. So don't be afraid. You don't need to be perfect. Some of it's just instinct in terms of teaching anything. So, well done. And I would encourage anyone to attend these classes. I know that there are many free classes around the place, but also to offer them if that's something that you're able to do, if you have a little bit more than the rest of us of Te Reo. Well, that's the end of my reflections. In terms of my own personal learning of the language, um, again, haven't done a huge amount of homework since the last time. My class is in a few days' time, the second class, so I will be studying this handout and at least memorizing a few of the phrases and trying to remember what they mean, so that if we do go ahead and practice next time, I'll feel a little bit more confident. I'll be able to fill in the gaps of my pepeha, my greeting, if you like, so that I'll be able to do that a bit better next time as well, because I know that's coming. So, but yeah, really excited to be on this journey again with a helper this time, and I think that will make a little bit difference. So, thanks for listening. Please be encouraged in your own language learning or teaching journey, and know that perfection is not the aim here, folks. Let's just do a little bit, and we'll all get there. All right, ka kite ana. I'll see you next time. Cheers.